People who have committed murder in self-defense. What happened? I woke up in the middle of the night to a loud banging on the front door. On the security camera, I could see a man kicking the door and holding an axe, repeatedly aiming it at the door and the handle. We called the police, and they were on their way. While on the phone with 911 on speaker, I grabbed my shotgun and shouted at the man to leave because we were armed. My wife stayed with the children in the room. I shouted several times for him to leave or I would shoot, but he continued kicking the door. Eventually, he broke the door enough to get inside. I aimed and shouted again, but he came at me, and I fired. The shotgun blast hit him in the upper chest. I kicked the axe away and kept him under the gun. The police arrived less than 30 seconds after the shot. I put down the gun and raised my hands. The officer took the weapon, handcuffed me, and tried to help the man, but he was already dead. I think the police still had to try to save him. The police took me in for questioning. I sent the detective the video from the porch and indoor security cameras. A few days later, we got a call from the police saying that the man's family wanted to talk to me. The detective advised me to agree. They turned out to be very kind people and apologized for their son's actions. They offered to pay for the repair of the door he broke and other damages to the house. The father was very quiet but looked kind. The mother did most of the talking. She explained that their son had gotten into drugs and they had lost him years ago. They both apologized several times and offered help. I explained that the insurance covered the damage, including our antique redwood door with stained glass and the damage to the house. Soon after the incident, we sold the house. The children and we ourselves felt uncomfortable continuing to live there and moved to the other end of the city. Since then, every year we receive a Christmas card from the parents of that man. Another incident was attacked by 4 guys. One of them stabbed me in the side. During the struggle, I managed to stab one of them in the side and in the lung. The other 3 ran away, and I was sitting leaning against the fence, listening to the guy trying to breathe and screaming until the police and ambulance arrived. He died before he was taken to the hospital. I was taken to the hospital and then to the police station for questioning. The court ruled the incident as self-defense, but I was required to undergo therapy to help me cope with the nightmares. The whole process took about 5 years. Music video director in Los Angeles. I posted this story about 10 years ago. I killed a man who tried to break into my apartment. He was looking for his wife, who he had just beaten almost to death. At 2 a.m., I heard them arguing. They were loud enough to hear through my bathroom. I closed the bathroom and bedroom doors to muffle the noise. At 2:15 a.m., she knocked on my door. She had a broken nose, a swollen left eye, and she was limping because she fell while fleeing from her apartment. I told her to go to the bathroom to wash up and then hide in my bedroom. Her husband was shouting her name, left his apartment, noticed the blood trail leading to my door, and started banging on the door and shouting for me to let him in. I warned him 3 times that if he didn't stop, I would kill him. He broke the lock, the door swung open, and I hit him with a baseball bat on the head. The neighbor fell to the floor in shock, landing on his stomach. I saw a pistol hidden behind his belt, grabbed it, threw it into the apartment, and warned him again. He got up and came at me, and I hit him in the stomach with the bat and then again on the head. That blow cracked his skull, and from the blood splatter, I realized he was dead. Fortunately, the neighbors had called the police at the beginning of the incident, and by the time he fell dead, the police were already coming up the stairs. Everyone who was awake came out to give statements. The police talked to the wife in my bedroom. She said she wouldn't leave the room, so they took her statement right there. I wrote a statement, handed over the bat, and showed them the pistol, which was registered to him. Music video shooting incident the day I called into work to warn that I wouldn't be coming in. I was actually a witness to a murder. I'm a music video director in Los Angeles. We were shooting a scene for a music video in Compton when local gang members showed up. Words were exchanged, and one of them pulled out a gun and demanded payment for filming on his territory. The personal bodyguard pulled out his gun and shot him in front of everyone. Definitely a moment of mixed feelings. The guy really thought he could just point a gun at someone without consequences. Friend's incident, my friend had a similar situation. He hit someone in a fight, and the guy died. He was charged with manslaughter and served less than 2 years. Due to stories like these, I try to stay away from street fights. Plus, I'm old, weak, fat, and can't fight. But mostly, it's because of stories like these. The father of my colleague was a jewelry salesman. On one of his calls with expensive jewelry, as he was leaving the building, he was shot at in the parking lot. He fell behind his car, and when one of the attackers approached closer, he shot him. The second one fled. The father of my colleague survived, and both criminals ended up in prison. College friends incident. A friend of mine in college had a child with a guy who turned out to be a complete asshole. She couldn't save her child after their breakup. She returned to her parents. This guy completely lost it, and he was arrested several times for stalking her. One day, he came to her parents' house and started shooting at it. She and her mother went to the store, but her father was in the shed at the time. In the end, the father shot the guy. No one was really sad about it. Attempted bicycle theft. One night, a guy tried to steal my bicycle while I was walking with it. In my country, it's forbidden to ride a bicycle in certain pedestrian zones. After I refused and tried to push him away, he stabbed me in the stomach. I reacted by hitting him with my keys clenched between my fingers, hitting his neck and nicking an artery. He died within a couple of minutes. Neighbor's dog incident. My then pregnant wife was attacked by a neighbor's dog. I pulled her away, and the dog latched onto my wrist. In the end, I emptied a .22 caliber magazine into it. Perhaps this isn't the self-defense story someone wanted to hear, but I don't see another option when an aggressive dog is running around the neighborhood, attacking animals and people. Changed to clarify that it was not some fucking pit bull, but a Doberman mix with something else. Enough with blaming pit bulls, they're not bad dogs. Stop accusing them. Swedish incident. This case took place in Sweden in 2022. A man killed 2 people who broke into his house. He used a knife and inflicted more than 20 wounds on one of them. The case went to 2 court instances, and both times he was acquitted. This became a big event in Sweden, as such cases were unprecedented in the modern history of the country. The Swedish equivalent of the Supreme Court refused to review the case, deciding that the lower courts had not made any errors in their decisions. The man was acquitted because his actions were deemed self-defense, even though he used excessive force. There is a paragraph in the law that essentially states that if a person could not control their actions, they are not liable. Prison time for excessive force. I did not commit murder for the purpose of self-defense, but I did attempt murder for that purpose. However, the level of force I used was deemed excessive, and I had to serve 6 years in prison. My mother was living with a man who seemed like an angel but turned out to be a devil. One night, they had a fight that was heading towards violence, so I called the police, hoping they would come and defuse the situation and prevent harm. Unfortunately, they didn't arrive in time. 45 minutes after my call, the man attacked my mother with a knife in his hand. He leaned all his weight on her neck. They were on the couch. Seeing this, I pulled a knife from my pocket. I had taken it in anticipation of possible problems because this guy was 30 centimeters taller than me and weighed 70 kilograms more. I heard the terrible sound my mother made, trying to call for help, but it turned out to be just a scream from fear. In the end, I stabbed him in the back, then took him in a chokehold, pulled him away from her, and struggling with him, inflicted several more blows with the knife. I was charged with attempted murder. I pleaded guilty to several counts and was given 11 years and 4 months, half of which I spent in prison and the other half under supervision. He didn't die, but he was close to it. Work incident. I was a manager at a grocery store. One of my employees was being harassed by a guy about 19 to 20 years old. I asked him to leave her alone, and he started threatening me that he would catch me alone on the street. At that time, I lived in a small town where it was easy to track down a specific person and find out the necessary information about them. I didn't have a car, so I walked home, and our store closed around 9 to 10 p.m. I was just over 20 and had a younger brother, 2 years younger than me. He had authority in the town, knew people, and was a problem solver, while I was a good boy. Anyway, I called my little brother and said I was a bit nervous and scared. He decided to meet me that evening and walk home together. The guy approached us at high speed, almost hitting us, and parked on the next street. As we crossed the road to the school playground, he ran at us. As it turned out, he had found out that I had a 1-year-old daughter and started shouting that he would kill her and so on. In short, I swung at him and tried to hit him. I'm a lousy fighter, so I ended up tripping and falling. This guy was almost on top of me when I heard my brother shout, "Hey, what the fuck, he has a knife." I managed to kick him and push him away from me. After that, my brother ran up and swung at the guy's chin with all his might. I heard a crunch. The guy's knife fell out of his pocket and ended up next to him on the ground. He started to get up and reach for the knife. Then I ran up and kicked him in the jaw with all my might. He collapsed silently. My brother and I, scared to death, ran home. My brother assured me that the guy deserved the way we treated him, but I felt awful, like a real piece of shit. A month later, I came across a GoFundMe page that had been set up to raise funds for reconstructive surgery on the guy's jaw. His jaw was broken, it was fixed, and several surgeries were planned to restore its functionality. The page stated that he had an accident on a certain day and time. exactly on the day and time of our fight. It really shook me up. Most of all, I was struck by the fact that the guy never told anyone about my brother and me. I guess we would have had a good defense since it was self-defense, but I was still shocked that he didn't even try to harm us or hold us accountable. Neighbor's incident. My neighbor killed a person in self-defense. He got into his car and was about to leave when his wife's ex-boyfriend ran up to the car door, opened it, and punched him in the face. The neighbor shot and killed him. He received 20 years in prison for manslaughter. The prosecutor argued that his actions could not be considered self-defense and convinced the jury that the ex-boyfriend, after hitting the neighbor, no longer posed a threat to him. The recording shows that the ex-boyfriend, upon seeing the weapon, stepped back before the neighbor fired. Currently, my neighbor is trying to appeal the verdict. Self-defense at a motel? At that time, I was working in a different city and stayed at a fancy motel booked by the company. I had just returned from work, threw my clothes in the room, and went across the road to 7-Eleven. On the way, I noticed a woman sitting in front of the store crying and holding something resembling a child. She was alone and sobbing. I approached closer, and being about a couple of meters away from her, I said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She looked up and nodded, but was clearly upset. She didn't look injured or beaten. I asked if she needed anything, and she looked at me again, but as soon as she looked at me, her eyes darted to the right of me. I turned my head and saw a man running towards me at full speed. Before I could react, he raised his hand to hit me. On the run, I dodged, and he ended up just crashing into me. After that, he started wildly swinging his fists, but almost missed me. The guy fought more like a child, just swinging his arms in all directions. I backed away, circled around him, dodging, doing everything to avoid direct contact and not engage in a fight with him. At some point, he rushed at me again, but I managed to grab him by the shoulders and, using his body weight, threw him past me onto the ground. He got up and ran behind the 7-Eleven building. I looked around, glanced at the woman as if asking, "What the hell was that?" She was holding the baby tightly, not saying a word, and there was no one else around. I looked behind the 7-Eleven building, but there was nothing there. Then I went into the store to talk to the employee or someone who might have seen something. About 5 minutes later, I left the store with snacks and beer. When I walked around the building to see if the woman was still there, she was gone. I headed back to the motel but heard someone running towards me again, this time from the direction of the gas station. I turned around and saw the same guy running straight at me. I took a fighting stance, raised my right leg, and kicked him with all my might with a straight kick to the chest. From the impact, he fell, his legs flying up in the air. The guy fell on his back and hit the back of his head hard on the asphalt, knocking himself out. A couple of people from the gas station saw all this and came up to me. I immediately called 911, and the police arrived in 3 minutes. The ambulance arrived much later. I told the cops the whole story. They looked at the 7-Eleven and motel cameras and said it was clearly self-defense. They took my details and released me after 45 minutes. 3 days later, they called me and said that the man had a brain hemorrhage and would probably not survive. The guy was homeless and well known to the police. He had no family or insurance, and he was on life support. My name is still listed in this case, but I have not been charged with manslaughter or anything similar. Security guard on a ship. In 2020, I worked as a security guard ensuring the safety of ships during the lockdown. My friend, a former Army Ranger who was medically discharged at 23, attended a veterans support group where he was invited to a job by someone looking for security specialists. He was thrilled with the job. The ship required all workers to be vaccinated, which significantly reduced the number of potential employees. Usually only former military personnel are hired, but due to the desperate situation and the high level of negligence, I was also offered a position. I am good with a rifle and had previously worked on an ambulance. I had to take a small firearms test to prove my qualifications, and in the end, I was hired, albeit with a much lower salary than everyone else. Still, I earned in a few months the amount equal to the average annual salary of a person. We underwent training and boarded the ship in the UAE, en route to Mombasa. We were attacked. I remember standing and seeing the spark from the ricochet of a bullet fired by pirates. It hit a pipe, and liquid started flowing out. I thought, wow, that's a real bullet. The thought that someone was shooting at me was so foreign that it took me a while to realize it. I didn't hear anything but my breathing and heartbeat. Usually on ships, it's very noisy, as it is during gunfire, but I didn't hear anything. I peeked out from behind the sandbags, and by pure chance, my sight was exactly on one of the pirates. I saw the whites of his eyes. He was wearing a blue Sesame Street t-shirt and holding an AK-47. I made a strange sound that I had never made before or since, took the rifle off the safety, and shot him right in the right cheek. In my report, it says that I also shot another person in the boat, but I don't remember that at all. I only remember seeing blood on the back of their boat through the sight. I also remember bragging before the trip that nothing would happen, and even if it did, I would be fine. I was wrong, but not for the reasons I expected. My boss gave me the number of a psychotherapist who had participated in the Battle of Mogadishu, and that person probably saved my life. I was so angry at the pirate for making me shoot over such a stupid thing as money, I would have paid him myself just so he wouldn't try to hijack the ship. This experience made me look at how fragile life is with bitterness, and at the same time with realization. I just moved my finger a couple of centimeters and thereby interrupted 2 lives. Several decades of life simply disappeared. Reflection on killing. I often think about the guy in the t-shirt with the cookie. This guy was cheerful. What was his name? Was he the older brother like me? What was his favorite sports team? Was there a girl he was in love with? A couple of nights after the incident, we watched Star Wars. In the scene where Han and Leia are dodging on Endor, and the stormtrooper crashes into a tree and dies, I burst into tears. The scene I had seen dozens of times with a faceless character in the film made me cry, and cry over the death of the stormtrooper. My psychotherapist helped me deal with the thought that I killed a person because of money. He asked what I would do if someone told me, "If you shoot, you won't be paid." I answered that I would still shoot because otherwise I or my team could die. Thereby, he proved to me that I did it not for the money, but to protect my friends. For the same reason, he himself shot people in Somalia. Thank you very much for watching. In the comments under the video, people who have committed murder in self-defense, write what happened, and don't forget to check out our other videos. Hugs, bye.